Welcome back, my fellow assassins, to a jam-packed episode of the Dark Assassins podcast, the show that dives deep into not just technology, but the concepts, software, and procedures behind it all, and explains it so simply that even your grandma can understand it. As always, I'm your host, the Dark Assassin. So, ladies and gentlemen, Air Force One has struck again. Yes, so if you're unfamiliar, Air Force One, of course, being that of Craig Federighi, the Senior Vice President of Software at Apple. He struck again because Apple recently hosted their Worldwide Developers Conference, or WWDC, or as us cool kids say, Dub, was hosted this week. They had their keynote address on Monday, and boy, oh boy, did they release a lot of stuff, which we are going to dive in deep on today. So before we get started, when we're talking through some of these features that they released, specifically updates to like things like Messages, Mail, Maps, Safari, that kind of thing, keep in mind that while I will discuss these on, certain platforms, like this is coming to iOS, this is coming to macOS, keep in mind that almost all of these will be available across all the versions of iOS, macOS, and iPadOS, just for your awareness. So before we get started here, we also have to give a shout out to Craig Federighi, Air Force One. What an absolute gem this man is. I mean, he totally ran the show. He's got so much energy, and his legend is without a doubt just unrivaled by anyone else. He's a total meme god. So here's to you, Craig Federighi. We salute you. Okay, but for real, let's actually get into this. So first up is iOS 16. So the biggest name feature here is they completely redesigned the lock screen, which looks pretty great in my opinion. So now you're able to personalize the lock screen. You can change styles and the fonts of the time and the date. You can add. You can tap on various elements of the lock screen to edit them. You can have multiple lock screens. You can add widgets to the lock screens. Like you can add a temperature widget, a calendar widget. You can add your activity rings if you're into that. All kinds of stuff. And you can even update the depth of field too. So you can even make it so your wallpaper is kind of slightly in front of the time. So rather than the time and the date always being overlaid over your wallpaper, you can kind of give it this 3D effect where your wallpaper can kind of overlay on the date and time, which is pretty cool. And another thing you can do is you can dynamically set this up so that your lock screen will change according to what focus mode you have set. So focus mode, for those who don't remember, focus mode was a addition in iOS 15 for do not disturb mode. So you can set it based on if you're at work, or if you're driving, or if you're trying to get ready for bed, or whatever you want your focus to be. You can set it to so only certain notifications can come through, or only certain people can contact you, that kind of thing. So depending on what focus mode you're in, you can set it to have a specific wallpaper. Another thing they added was what they call live activities. So this will show live updates to things like music and sports. And this will prevent you from just getting a bunch of spam notifications from, the NBA app or NFL or, whatever, getting you constant score updates or whatever. What this allows it to do is, rather than, like I said, a bunch of updates, you'll just get one kind of banner notification at the bottom of the screen that, will have a running clock of, what the time left is, and will auto update the scores for you, which is pretty cool, pretty handy. So going back to notifications, they redid the notifications. So now then coming kind of from the top of the lock screen, right below the time and going down, the notification will just kind of be at the bottom of the screen to give you a better view of your lock screen in your wallpaper. And then moving on to other features they added some more updates to iMessage. So this, you can now edit messages you just sent. You can also undo or delete messages you sent. But one thing to keep in mind is you can only edit or unsend messages in the first 15 minutes of sending the message. So if you send a message and then say 20 minutes later, you're like, oh shoot, I forgot to, add a comma, or I used the wrong version of there, or, what have you, then you're kind of out of luck. But if it's within the first 15 minutes and the person you're sending the message to, or the people in the group with you are running the latest version of iOS, then you can go ahead and either edit or delete the message, which is pretty convenient. Another thing that you can do is you can mark message threads as unread so you can respond to them later. So let's say you're on your lock screen, right, and you accidentally tap on a message and you open the message, but you don't have time to read the paragraph that the person sent to you. What you can do is you can mark the message as unread so you actually remember to go back and look at it, rather than going and seeing that you have no new message notifications. You'll actually have, that unread notification there, so you can be like, oh yeah, I forgot to respond to this, and you'll have that notification right there for you. Another thing they added was they improved on-device dictation, which was, so basically they made the dictation better, so better translation of words that you're saying into text that has appeared on the screen. And they also allowed you to keep the keyboard now stays up, so you can easily transition between speaking what you want it to say versus typing it out. Another feature that they added was they added a new addition to live text. So last year they released this feature for live text, which basically let you either take a picture, or on a picture you already had saved, you could highlight the text in the picture. It used on-device machine learning to pick up what text was. It was able to pull text out of images, but now they added a new functionality to allow you to do this on videos as well. Now, one thing to keep in mind with the videos is the video does have to be paused, so the video can't be playing and you try to copy text. But I mean, pause the video for like a couple seconds, select the text you want, copy it, whatever. So this would be, really convenient for anyone trying to take notes through like video lectures, or if you're software developers and you're watching tutorials online, you can easily just pause the video and copy that code and paste it right in, and bingo bango, you got your application there. Just like Stack Overflow, but now you can do it with videos. So that's the nice feature. Another thing that you can do is again, using the on-device machine learning capabilities. You can now select subjects from pictures, so like people or animals or what have you. You can click on them in the picture, and through the magic of machine learning and artificial intelligence, it'll pop out that subject, so that person or dog or cat or whatever, and then it'll allow you to copy it and drag it around to either other applications or drag it into messages or what have you. So depending on how good this feature ends up being, gone are the days of the meme lords having to go into Photoshop and manually trace around the images they want. Now you can just do it on device with machine learning and just click and good to go. So the meme production might be greatly increased with this new feature. So another feature that they updated was the wallet app. So in select states where you're able to add your driver's license to your wallet, you can now use that to validate your age and identity in certain apps that require it. So rather than having to go through the hassle of taking a picture of the front and back of your license to verify your identity. If you have your license set up inside the Wallet app, you can just automatically use that to verify your identity and age if they need it. You also now have the ability to securely share keys if you're into that. If you have your house key or your car key, I know they recently, I think in iOS 15, I believe, they came out with car keys for the wallet. I don't know how widespread that is now. I know it's only on like new cars, so probably not a ton of people have it. But if you do have keys to your house or your car saved in your wallet, you can now share those with people. Pretty cool, I guess. Not my kind of thing, but, more power to you. You can now securely accept payments on the iPhone too. So if you want to charge someone something, you can just easily have them tap on the iPhone and you can accept payments that way. And they also added this other feature called Apple Pay, like pay later. So basically you can use Apple Pay to pay for an item, and then you have the option to basically, in the course of like 4 different installments with 0 interest, pay that whatever you bought. I guess if you're into that, I feel like could potentially run into some issues with certain people, but again, I am not a financial advisor, obviously, so you do what you want with your money, but here on the Dark Assassins podcast, we're just telling you the new features, and you can do with that what you will. So they also made some updates to the Maps app. So they're adding new locations and cities for City Experience. So if you're not familiar with what City Experience is, aka if you don't live in a big city, basically it allows you to see like 3D models of different buildings and kind of give you a more immersive feel into what the city is just by looking at the maps. So they brought new cities and locations to that. They also added multi-stop routing for up to 15 stops. So if you're planning a road trip, you can add up to 15 stops on the trip, and you can also, on the trip itself, you can ask Siri to add a new stop on the trip if you like. You can also see how much your journey will cost using transit. So if you're a user of, the public transit system through the trains, metro, bus, whatever, you can see how much your fare will cost. So that's pretty handy. They also added I think this is pretty cool personally. They added a look around feature to MapKit, so developers can now allow users to look around. So if you're familiar, most people are more familiar, I think, with Google's Street View, which basically allows you to, drag this little yellow guy onto the road, and you can kind of get a 360 view of, what the actual, road looks like, all the buildings around it, that kind of thing. So Apple recently came out with their version of Street View. So now they're adding this ability into MapKit, which is the API or the application programming interface. So developers can, pull this capability into their apps. So, for example, you could think of, an app like Zillow or some other, app to allow you to do home search. You can look around the neighborhood and kind of see the house, from the street. Another thing they brought to iOS 16 is they added more updates to sports, specifically in the Apple News app. You can now get live updates and live activities, and Apple News has a new sports section, where you can follow all your favorite sports teams. From macOS and iPadOS last year, they brought this new feature called Quick Notes, which basically allows you to drag from the bottom of the screen. You can create a quick note. That's now coming to the iPhone in iOS 16. Now, for all of you on the iPhone that don't have an Apple Watch, you can now get the fitness app from the Apple Watch now on the iPhone for all users, so it's not solely an Apple Watch exclusive anymore. Spotlight has been added to the bottom of the home screen, as well as some improvements to Spotlight, which we'll get into once we get to the macOS section. And they also added some new family sharing options. So anyone that has families that they have family sharing set up, you can now share purchases and subscriptions with up to 5 family members through the family sharing. So if you have, any number of the Apple subscriptions like Apple Music or iCloud or Apple One or Apple News Plus or Arcade Plus or, whatever, you can share that now with up to 5 family members. You can also add accounts for kids with parental controls built in upon setup. So anyone with kids, that'll probably be pretty handy for you. You can now also set up new devices for kids with parental controls you selected with already configured, so you don't have to worry about setting up the device and then going in and adding all the parental controls or anything like that. And you can also now approve child's requests for more screen time for messages rather than having to go through settings. So now moving on to some iCloud and photo stuff. They recently added iCloud shared photo libraries. So basically now if you go on a trip with your family or friends, you can create a shared photo library. So all the photos can be uploaded to this one shared library. So not everyone after the trip is over has to go through like, oh no, which photos do I have that you have? And you have this photo, I don't have that photo. So all those photos can be in one shared place. And another feature they talked about was with some more, AI machine learning stuff, it can basically detect if other people in the shared library are near you. It'll automatically, send the photos to that shared library. Otherwise, it'll just, save them on your device. And you can customize that too as well. And they added some new privacy features also called This one's called Safety Check. Basically allows you to review and update access for information like passwords and location that you shared with people. You can easily kind of go in and remove that access if you need to. They also made some updates to the Home app. So if you're a smart home fanatic, you can now add new categories. It now has the ability to add categories for smart home devices, and you can now display up to 4 cameras at once in the Home app. And I believe you can swipe through your pages of cameras. So if you have multiple cameras that you use to monitor your house, you can view those there. You can also view more info from your home with the lock on the lock screen with widgets. So we talked about earlier that the lock screen got completely redesigned, and you can now add widgets. You can add a widget for the Home app, so you can view certain things like your house temperature, lights, whatever. And then CarPlay also got redesigned, which this was a complete overhaul. So now it has the ability to integrate with car's hardware and change car settings like the radio, temperature, inside the CarPlay app itself. So you don't need to go through the car's infotainment system or any of the car's settings or whatever. And it also can now power the car's instrument cluster too. So this can display things like your speed, RPM, oil pressure, that kind of thing. And you can also, customize the themes and gauges. It looks really cool. I highly encourage you to go onto Apple's website and check it out if you haven't seen it for yourself. The only thing that is kind of a bummer is it's only available for new cars. So if you have an older car with CarPlay, I don't believe you're going to get this new update. So you have to get a new car, unfortunately, which I'm not sure how widespread it's going to be. I don't believe they announced it yet. It sounds like this is going to be a thing coming in 2023. So you'll have to stay tuned on that. So now the big question that everyone's asking, well, I guess maybe you're not asking, but I will have to say it is a sad day for iOS 16 because the iPhone 6S has finally lost support. It was going strong there. It really was. It was hanging in there. We thought it wasn't going to make it to iOS 14, and it did. We didn't think we thought there was no chance in heck it could get to iOS 15, yet it did. But alas, it has fallen. The iPhone 6s is no longer supported, which also, surprisingly, the iPhone 7 also lost support too, which was kind of interesting. So if you have an iPhone 8 or newer, or you have the second generation iPhone SE or newer, you have support. Otherwise, you do no longer have support for iOS, unfortunately. So moving on to WatchOS, WatchOS 9 now has 4 new watch faces. In my opinion, the most notable was this astronomy watch face, which now displays current cloud cover across the world, which I think that's pretty darn cool. You can add, now there's a new Siri UI and banner notifications, and you can discover and follow new podcasts on the watch, like the Dark Assassins podcast, like you're listening to right now. You can easily follow that on your watch. They added some updates to the workout app with improvement to metrics. They added 3 new metrics for running, vertical oscillation, stride length, and ground contact time, if you're into that. They also added a new feature which can automatically detect, if you're into triathlons, it can automatically detect, going between the different stages, so you don't have to manually change that yourself. It'll be able to auto-detect that for you. It also added heart rate zones, so you can see, where you are in the heart rate zones. If you want to try to stay in a certain heart rate zone during your workout, you can see that. And you can also create custom workouts now too, so that's cool. So they also added new updates to the sleep application. So before you could track your sleep, but now they added the ability for you to track your sleep stages. So you can get a better sense of how long you're staying in each sleep stage and that kind of thing. So you can see how much time you spent in each stage and when you might have woken up. You can see how your sleep cycles go through each stage, and you can also contribute your data to sleep studies if you're into that. And anyone with AFib, you can now track how much time you spend in AFib. You can also track the times and dates. It also tracks the times and dates for you, so you can kind of get a sense of, what maybe give you a sense of, what could be causing that. Apple's currently seeking FDA clearance on it. And another thing with the AFib too is this will kind of automatically kick in if your watch detects that you got into AFib. So if you don't have AFib and you've never experienced it, then this obviously doesn't affect you. But it is definitely helpful for those that have it. Another thing that they allowed you to do is you're now able to track your medications, so you're able to track medications, vitamins, supplements. You can also set reminders on when to take your medications. You can also scan the label of the medication on your iPhone, and it'll automatically import the medication to your Apple Watch for you, so you don't have to manually type it out and find it. So that's pretty handy. You're now able to also view critical, serious, or moderate interactions for each medication. So for instance, if the medication says it shouldn't be taken with alcohol or, what have you, you can see that in the app. And you can also invite family members to share their health data if you're into that. It also brings 4 new keyboard languages and RIP the Apple Watch Series 3. It is finally no longer supported, although I believe it's still available for purchase on the Apple website, at least at the recording of this podcast. They might have taken it off, which would be kind of weird that they would still have it on there, seeing that it's going to be losing support in a couple months. But, you do you, Apple, I guess. So the next one that we're going to talk about is some hardware that got released at WWDC. So Apple released their new M2 chip, which is the successor for their M1 chip that they released. So as you might expect, if you've seen any of the hardware releases for Apple's silicon releases, they gave more ambiguous, vague, and poorly labeled graphs depicting performance. So you just kind of had to guess as to what tests they were running and how they were viewing the scores and all that stuff. Basically, they would have probably failed a statistics class with those graphs, with how bad they were labeled, but whatever. It's the same 5nm process as the M1, but they're using a second generation core design. Basically, that means that it's the size of the transistors are the same, but they kind of re-architected them to make it faster. So now there's 25% more transistors than the M1, so now there's 20 billion of them. The bandwidth for the unified memory is now 100 gigabits per second, which is 50% faster than the M1, and you can now have up to 24 gigabytes of that unified memory, whereas the M1 you could only have up to 16. It still has the same 4 performance and 4 efficiency cores for the CPU. The CPU is 18% faster than the M1 is. The M2 GPU now has up to 10 cores. The bin version, or the basic version, it only has 8 cores for the GPU, which the original M1, 8 cores was the higher end version, and 7 cores for the GPU was the bin version, so that is a little bit of an upgrade there. The GPU is up to 35% faster than the M1. And the M2 chip also gets the new media engine, just like the M1 Pro, Max, and Ultra chips do. So this allows for ProRes encode and decode, which is basically allows hardware encoding. And the reason why this is a big thing, and basically the meaning of what hardware coding is the algorithms that run the encoding and decoding run directly on the hardware itself, so you don't have to go through any kind of software translation layer, which means that you get a lot better performance if you're doing any kind of video editing. And it also has a 40% faster neural engine too compared to the M1. So next, now that they released the M2 chip, it's coming in 2 new MacBooks that they announced. The first one being the MacBook Air. It's got a completely new redesign. It's got a flat, squared-off design, just like the new MacBook Pros that they released in the fall. It is no longer a wedge shape. So if you were a fan of the iPad Air's wedge shape, it is, alas, no more. It is 11.3 millimeters thick. Yes, Apple, I said that correctly. Millimeters thick, not thin. It is 2.7 pounds. The colors that it comes in is silver, space gray, starlight, and midnight, which personally I think the midnight looks pretty cool. It's like this kind of black with a little bit of blue, so it's not quite a navy blue, but it's also not really a full black. Although take that with a grain of salt, go look at it for yourself, since I am colorblind, so I could be completely wrong on that, but I think it looks cool. As far as the ports are concerned, you get the new MagSafe port that came on the new MacBook Pros. You get 2 Thunderbolt ports, an audio headphone jack with capability for high impedance headphones, and now the display also increased to 13.6 inches. It's also brighter, and now the display also has the notch, which came to the MacBook Pros, which houses just the webcam. Speaking of the webcam, it's a 1080p webcam, and you also get a 3-mic array for better audio capture, and you also have improved speakers, and now you have spatial audio support too. The MacBook Air is still fanless. It comes with a compact power adapter with 2 USB-C ports. I should note, though, that it's optional for the base model, but it's standard on the higher tier model. You can also elect to get a 67-watt fast charger that can charge you, according to Apple, 50% in 30 minutes. You get the same 18 hours of video playback for battery life on the new MacBook Air. And the starting price for this MacBook Air is $1199, and that gets you the 8-core CPU. You get the binned 8-core GPU, 8 gigabytes of RAM, and 256 gigabytes of solid-state storage, and it'll be available next month in July. The base MacBook Air, with the M1 is still available, however, for $1,000 if you are into that. The other MacBook that they released with the M2 chip is the 13-inch MacBook Pro. The design is completely unchanged from the other one, so you still have the 2 Thunderbolt ports, headphone jack, and the touch bar. It's starting at $1,300, but this time you get the higher tier M2 chip, so you get the 8-core CPU, 10-core GPU, 8 gigabytes of RAM, 256 gigabyte solid state drive, and that is also available next month in July. And this you get up to 20 hours of battery life, just like the previous model. So the operating system powering this is, of course, macOS, and as the one and only Craig Federighi said, the crack marketing team, they finally came to rest at Ventura. So that is the name for the new macOS Ventura. The big highlight feature that they talked about was this thing called Stage Manager. So basically it automatically rearranges the windows to the left side and only keeps the app you're currently working on in the center. So if you have a problem of having a bunch of windows open, this can kind of help you better organize them. Another thing you can do with the Stage Manager is you can select multiple apps and kind of group them into one stage, if you will, and then kind of cycle through them. And then another thing, if you have, multiple pages files or multiple web browsers open of multiple Safari windows, it'll group those together automatically, although you can, drag them out and put them into different groups. And you can make, a group with a Pages document that you're working on with a Safari browser and maybe a calculator or something, and you can have those grouped together. And you can also click on the desktop to reveal the desktop, so you can drag items from your desktop over to one of the stages into the windows to allow you to add files to, say, your email or to your PowerPoint presentation or your Word document, or whatever the case may be. So they also added some updates to Spotlight, so you now get better results. Now you can actually get actual web results from Spotlight, and you can also run shortcuts, start timers, and all that fun stuff. They also brought some new updates to Mail, so kind of like Messages, you can now undo sends, but it should be noted that you can only undo the send within 10 seconds of sending the message. I'm not sure how useful that'll be. I guess if you're really quick on the trigger, you can unsend it, but yeah, I'm not sure how that'll work for most people. But you can also schedule messages to be sent at certain times, and you can also set reminders on messages to remind you at a certain time to come back to the message. They also improved search functionality to the Mail app as well. And like I mentioned before, with most of these features, this is also coming to iOS and iPadOS too. So they also made some updates to Safari, which is, again, coming to iOS and iPadOS. So they added shared tab groups, so now you can share. So they introduced tab groups back in iOS 15, which allowed you to kind of group your tabs together. So now you can share one of those groups with a group of people or multiple people, and you can see, who's in what tab. So if you're kind of working on a collaborative project, this could be helpful. So you can all have, the same tabs open and that kind of thing. They also added this new feature called Passkeys, which uses cryptographic techniques and biometrics on device to authenticate new passkeys. So essentially trying to get rid of passwords, which personally I think trying to go away from passwords is a good thing, because passwords are, with how many people have to remember, they're just using the same password, and more often than not. Some people are good and they have different passwords and use very complex passwords, but definitely going to a passwordless future is definitely the future. So they only exist on your device, which is kind of the key to the passkeys, and only one passkey is made per application. And it also can be available in your iCloud keychain. So if you have multiple devices with your iCloud keychain set up, you can create a passkey on your Mac, and it'll be available on your iPhone. And they also made this cross-platform, so you will be able to use your passkeys on different devices that aren't Apple products, which is definitely a plus. They also added some new continuity features. So previously they had features like handoff, which allowed you to copy text from, say, your iPhone and paste it on your Mac and vice versa. So they extended this to FaceTime. So now you can, for example, you can now accept a call on your iPhone, say on your way home from work or whatever, and then once you get to your desk back at your house, if you have your Mac there, you'll get a little pop-up notification that'll be like, do you want to switch the FaceTime over to your Mac? So you can then switch the FaceTime over to your Mac, or like I said, you could have the FaceTime call on your Mac, and then say you have to get up to go somewhere, you can then switch the FaceTime call over to your iPhone. But probably the biggest feature is now you can use your iPhone's rear camera as your webcam on your Mac. So if your iPhone is close enough to the Mac, it'll recognize it and use it as the webcam, which is, I don't know how they did that, but it's pretty cool. So now you can have center stage and portrait mode capability on all Macs, whereas before that was basically non-existent, except I think on I think it was the Studio display that they launched had center stage capability, but now you can have it on any Mac you want. And they also have this other new feature called Desk View, which uses your iPhone's wide-angle lens to view your desk, which is kind of mind-boggling if you think about it, because your iPhone's camera will be pointed directly at you, yet it can, basically appear as though it's a top-down shot while also having a camera on you. So that's pretty cool. And they also redesigned the system settings, so now it's a sidebar rather than the multiple rows of settings. And probably the worst news about macOS is the support for it. So all Macs before 2017 are no longer supported, and only MacBook Airs and Mac Minis from 2018 and newer are supported. So if you have a MacBook Air that's older than 2018, no dice. And then I guess it should be noted that if you have one of the new Mac Pros from 2019, those are still supported. All other versions are unsupported. So moving on to iPadOS 16, so it gets pretty much all the same features from iOS and macOS, and finally it gets full external display support if you have an M1 Mac, or iPad rather. If you don't have an M1 iPad, then you don't get the full external display support. But in other news, the weather app is finally coming to the iPad, which is kind of about time. And they also added WeatherKit, which is their API to allow developers to integrate weather into their own apps if they want. They also added this new feature, which is also coming to iOS and macOS, called Freeform, which basically allows you to work collaboratively to plan projects, brainstorm ideas, draw with friends, just be creative. You can share files, insert web links, documents, videos, audio, all that good stuff. You can invite others to join, and you can see their changes in real time. So it's basically like this big collaborative suite. And I believe this is going to be coming later in the iOS and iPadOS 16 development. So not going to be when it first comes out, probably, maybe around the winter time, if I had to guess, maybe early spring. So now you can also play games together with SharePlay. They redesigned the Game Center, and they're also bringing what they call desktop-class apps. So you can now have undo and redo across the system. You can change file extensions and view folder sizes in the Files app. You can now do find and replace, and you can have customized toolbars. And the APIs to do this, they're releasing them so developers can incorporate them into their own apps. So another thing that they added to iPadOS is iPad storage can now be used as swap for extra system memory. So if you're unfamiliar with that concept, basically I would say all modern operating systems, if you ever happen to run out of system memory, what your computer will do will take some of that memory and put it on your on your disk, so on your SSD or on your hard drive, to free up some of that system memory. So files that are in memory that you're not necessarily using as often will kind of be pushed to what they call the swap, which is just memory space that has been allocated to be on your drive. So now that's being brought to the iPad. They also added a reference color mode, so you can now do color correcting work on the iPad. And you can also now scale apps, so you can kind of change the size of how your apps are, so kind of more of a desktop feature that they're bringing to the iPad. And so the stage manager that they were bringing to macOS is now also being brought to iPadOS, so you can resize and rearrange windows. You can see all recently used apps. They appear on the left. You can work with overlapping windows, which is kind of a first for iPadOS. And the wallpaper now fills the full display on external displays, of course, assuming you're running an iPad with an M1 chip. And you can now have up to 34 windows, or kind of 8 of the stage manager groups between running simultaneously between the external display and on the iPad. And you can also drag and drop things across from the iPad to the external display. So as far as support for iPadOS 16, any iPad Pro is supported. iPad Airs that are 3rd generation or newer are supported. Just the standard iPad 5th gen or newer is supported, and iPad minis 5th gen or newer is also supported. So if you're interested in getting a first-hand look at any of these, developer betas are available now. Betas for the general public are available in July, and all OSs will be available in the fall. So let's kind of get into my thoughts on this. So first off, hands down, star of the show, Craig Federighi. I mean, he kind of carried the performance. I mean, every time I see an Apple event with Craig in it, it's just such a great experience. He's so good, such a good presenter, and just his antics are hilarious and so good. But, kind of more specific to the event, it was very well executed, as all the virtual events have been. The lock screen features, definitely super cool. Kind of interested to get my hands on that and play around with that. And the ability to use an iPhone as the webcam for your Mac is pretty great. Since unless you're rocking like one of the new Macs, which even if you're using a fairly new one, you probably still only have a 720p webcam. So it's definitely really nice to be able to have that ability to use your iPhone's fantastic camera as your webcam. And going on that topic of for like FaceTime and stuff, the ability to switch between your iPhone, Mac, and iPad for FaceTime calls is definitely a very, very nice feature. But some things that I didn't necessarily care too much about, like, why in the world are they putting notches on their laptops? Like, Apple, what are you doing? You have plenty of space in that top bezel that you can easily fit the camera in. You don't need a notch. It looks terrible. Like, I could understand it maybe if you had actual features in the notch, but it's just the webcam. It's not even like the iPhones where you have all kinds of other sensors in there. It's just the webcam. You don't need a notch. Get rid of it. It looks terrible. That being said, though, I do think the new design as a whole, aside from the notch for the MacBook Air, does look pretty good, in my opinion. It's really thin. I like that they added the MagSafe back. That was pretty cool. I kind of touched on this earlier, but the ambiguous graphs, Apple, you need to stop that. Stop leaving us guessing as to what the real numbers are. Just flat out tell us what tests you did, what the numbers were, rather than, people pretty much guessing, trying to verify your claims until they actually get their hands on the devices and be like, oh, well, Apple's right in this test if you run this specific test, but if you run this one, you get different results. So they need to, do a better job of defining their metrics and that kind of thing, which I know they're not going to do, but it'd be cool if they did. As far as the CarPlay though, moving on to another topic, CarPlay, that looked incredible. I know I mentioned this when we talked about it, but if you have not seen what the CarPlay design looks like, go check it out, since it looks fantastic. But like I mentioned, it is kind of a bummer that it's only available on new cars, and those cars aren't even going to be announced till 2023 anyway. So that's a little bit of a bummer. And moving on to another thing, the astronomy background on the Apple Watch. I don't personally have an Apple Watch, but that astronomy background with the changing cloud cover looked freaking awesome. That was really cool. And I can't really say much about the Apple Watch features since I don't have an Apple Watch, so I don't really use any Apple Watch features. But then going back to some Mac stuff, I don't understand. Oh, I guess speaking of the Macs, we didn't even talk about. Oh yeah, we did talk about support. My bad. But I don't understand why they. Well, actually, I do understand. They're trying to kill off Intel as quick as possible is the real reason. But I don't understand why they drop support for so many capable Macs. Currently, I'm recording this podcast on a 2015 15-inch MacBook Pro. This thing is more than capable to run the latest version of macOS. I'm sorry, if you think a 2017 12-inch MacBook can run the latest version of macOS, I mean, those things are garbage, garbage time performance. Those things are terrible. And you're telling me that that's supported, but my 15-inch MacBook Pro isn't supported. My computer will blow that thing out of the water in any metric you want to run. I get it. They're trying to kill off, the Intel supported Macs and get everyone over to Apple Silicon. So I understand why they're doing it, but at the same time, you're supporting laptops that aren't nearly as powerful as some of the laptops you're dropping support for, which doesn't really make any sense from a usability perspective, I guess, since obviously if older computers can run it fine, why would you drop support? Mainly it's to get, people to switch and upgrade and all that stuff. So I understand, why they're doing it. But at the same time, if anyone in their right mind thinks that a 2017 13-inch MacBook Pro or a 2018 MacBook Air, or especially the 12-inch MacBooks that they're still supporting for some dumb reason, are able to run, macOS Ventura, but the 2015s and 2016 laptops can't, specifically the MacBook Pros can't, you're out of your mind, because I know for a fact that they can. So, helpful tip, if you are in the case like me, where your laptop or desktop or whatever you're running is no longer supported for macOS Ventura, I cannot confirm, but I am fairly certain that the Open Core Legacy Patcher project will add support for all the devices that are losing support now. So you should still be able to upgrade. You'll just kind of have to jump through a couple hoops to get onto the latest version. But don't fret. I feel like you will most likely be able to if you want to. So if that's, I think, pretty much just going to wrap it up for this episode. If you enjoyed it, I please ask that you would give it a like and a rating and a review. Send it to a friend or family member that you think will get some entertainment or some information out of this. Definitely, if they didn't watch WWDC and don't feel like spending an hour and 45 or 2 hours of their life, they can just come onto this podcast and give it a listen. So that's going to do it for me in this episode of the Dark Assassins podcast. Until next time, my fellow assassins, remember, bull nothing equals true. If action not equal to null, return true. I'll see you next time on the Dark Assassins podcast.